tea. It's warm, comforting, and incredibly British. It's also a simple way to explain a complex and controversial concept, sexual consent. If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're just making a cup of tea. So you ask, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they respond, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. But if you ask, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" and they go, "I don't really know," then you can make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Maybe they were conscious when you asked them and they said yes, but by the time it took you to boil a kettle, brew the tea, and insert some milk and sugar, they are now unconscious. Don't give them the tea, because unconscious people don't drink tea. According to the Department of Justice, in 2019 alone, over 1.5 million women and nearly 1 million men were raped or assaulted by an intimate partner. This statistic alone shows that consent is an essential factor in every relationship, no matter the nature of that relationship. And because consent matters in any relationship, we also need to understand as a society where those boundaries begin and end. We can begin this conversation and teach these things as early as kindergarten, where we can teach them when to withhold or give consent from something as giving a hug or holding someone's hand. And this education needs to continue into the young adult years when the likelihood of sexual activity begins and the stakes get higher. Without the understanding of consent, manipulation can take hold of those young lives. Through the articles from CNN, Health Guideline, womenshealth.org, Sexual Coercion, and What Does It Look Like, and many, and through the poetry book Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, and a poem about consent by Miss Moem. From Anita Hill's statements in the Testament trial of Judge Clarence Thomas, and the book Some Boys by Patty Blount. Unconscious people don't want tea, a program, because as a survivor of sexual assault, I'm done with consent being swept under the rug. We need to take initiative as a society to understand and teach those of consent for our youth and for ourselves. Liz Kleinrock's lessons with her third graders often involve journal prompts, like why is consent important? Consent is important because if they didn't, they might have not wanted to get touched. Kleinrock said that even though these educations and idea for lessons arose from the current events regarding sexual behavior, she never once mentioned sex in her classes or linked consent to sex. Telling secrets. You have to ask permission before telling someone else's secret. The first boy that kissed me held my shoulders down, like the handlebars of the first bicycle he ever rode. I was 5. He was the first boy to teach me that my body was forgiving to those that wanted. Inside a Catholic school in Portland, Oregon, high school sophomores break into groups to discuss some once taboo topics: abusive relationships and consent. What's happening at this school represents a larger debate as lawmakers, educators, and teens themselves re-examine sex education. Central to the conversation is whether schools should expand curriculums to help kids understand consent, a concept often defined differently from state to state. If you really love me, do it. Come on, it's my birthday. Here, why don't you take a glass of wine and get out of those work clothes? We'll see what happens. Why don't our schools teach us that this is not how we treat people? We cannot spend one more day allowing people to grow up and continue this culture of predatory behavior. In a recent study, researchers at Columbia University found that students who had received refusal skills training were 50% less likely to experience penetrative sexual assault when they got to a college campus. Mr. Chairman, Senator Thurmond, members of the committee, My name is Anita F. Hill, and I'm a professor of law at the University of Oklahoma. And I, in 1981, was introduced to now Judge Thomas by a mutual friend. He asked if I would become his assistant, and I accepted that position. After approximately 3 months of working there, he asked me to go out socially with him. What happened next and telling the world about it are two most difficult things. I want to be quite frank here. Let's talk about consent. This doesn't mean keep badgering until the person relents. I declined the invitation to go out socially with him. I thought that by saying no and explaining my reasons, my employer would abandon his social suggestions. However, to my regret, in the following weeks, he continued to ask me out on several occasions. I'll break it down a little more. Let's take it from the top. You need to ask explicitly, and if there is not a yes, then stop. My working relationship became even more strained when Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. Because I was extremely uncomfortable talking about these subjects with him at all or sex at all, I told him that I did not want to talk about these things. My efforts to change the subject were rarely successful. The second they say no, it doesn't matter if they want it. The light is not green for go. He began to show displeasure in his tone and voice, as his demeanor, as he continued to pressure for an explanation. At this point, late 1982, I began to feel severe stress on the job. I began to become concerned that Clarence Thomas might find an excuse for dismissing me. These intimate acts are a privilege. It is rape if you take them by force. An unwilling yes or silence is not consent, of course. In the spring of 1983, he assured me that dinner was only a professional courtesy and not a social invitation. I reluctantly agreed. He told me that he was pleased with all the work that I had done. Finally, he made a comment that I will vividly remember. He said that if I ever told anyone of his behavior, that it would ruin his career. This was not an apology nor an explanation. This was his last remark about his reference to his own behavior. Everyone thinks we already have, so you might as well. It's just sex. You don't have to treat it like it's such a big deal. It'll be fun. You tell me to quiet down because my opinions make me less beautiful. Religion, government, the media. Everyone tells you it's never your fault. You're just an innocent guy minding your own business, and these women beguile you with their looks. Guys are so dumb. You waste half your lives trying to prove to everybody and their mother how strong you are, and then say crap like, "Ooh, baby, you make me so hard," as if you can't control your own body. But I was not made with a lightness on my tongue, so I could be easy to swallow. Talk to me when a guy you know turns ugly because you tell him you'd rather be with his best friend instead of him. Talk to me when that guy hears you say no, hears you but waits while your head spins and your stomach turns, hears you and waits till you fall over and then pounces and tells you that nobody gets to say no to him. Talk to me when he takes off your clothes and your limbs are too numb to stop him. Talk to me when he leaves you there alone, unconscious and bleeding, and then puts pictures of what he did to you online. In education, we try to play the long game. We lay the foundations for college, math, and middle school and job skills in kindergarten. But when it comes to teaching kids about consent, we do way too little, way too late. And evidence suggests that what we are doing doesn't give kids the skills they need to navigate adulthood. It's time for a party with friends and family. Mom's friend gives Finn a present. Does that mean he has to hug or kiss that person? Only if he wants to. Maybe Finn could high five or fist bump instead, or maybe he doesn't want to be touched at all. It's his choice what happens to his body.